then we can make a decision then.
All right, well, we are streaming live.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening and welcome to the Citizens Police Advisory Council's meeting for the Charleston Police Department. I'm Twan Fielding, the current chairman of the council, and we're so happy that you have been able to join us for this evening's meeting. At this time, we'll ask that Bethany would do roll call for us. Bethany, you are muted.
Juan, I don't have that list in front of me, but I've been writing everybody down as they come in.
Okay, so then we can go on. Do you have a set of quorum yet?
We have 9 right now, so we need one more person.
Okay. In the meantime, then, while we are awaiting at least one more council member to join us, it's been brought to my attention that some of us may not realize we do have 2 high school students, high school seniors who are members of the council and had been participating. However, one of them last week had to resign for other commitments and conflicts. And the city is the mayor is in the process of replacing that member. You may recall, Peter is on right now, Peter Beck.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Thank you. And Peter, as you all are aware, attends the meetings regularly. And thank you for doing that, Peter. Vanish Nepal had to resign and did send that email to us on last week. So the mayor is in the process of replacing his membership on the council. And once that name is provided, then you'll receive an email with that new member's name in it. And of course, that person will be present at our next meeting. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that we do have 2 high school students that are on the council, because that was brought to my attention that some of you may have thought that we did not have representation from high schoolers, and we do. The next item is moving on to approval of minutes. Bethany, are we at a quorum? Oh, I'm sorry, Doris has her hand raised.
Yes, I was not aware that we had some high school representation. How are we recruiting folks, high school students for as members of council?
Per the CPAC guidelines, it states that the mayor would submit the names of the high school seniors. If you know of someone who is interested in being a member, then you could send that name also to the mayor, Doris, to let him know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
that person.
You can also send that to Captain Thompson as well. I know he's been involved with that process.
Right, he has been.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure, thanks for asking. Any other questions?
And we are not at a quorum yet, Twan. We still only have 9.
Okay. We do have 2 citizens who signed up to speak to us tonight. If I'm looking at everyone, those who I could see, I think since they did sign up, I don't believe an action, maybe a voting action would be required from us.
No.
So would you council members agree to let's listen to those 2 citizens who have signed up to speak? Okay.
All right, our first person that has signed up to speak is Miguel Torres. And Mr. Torres, you can unmute your mic. And Twan, I don't know if you want to set a time limit or anything, just let me know.
Based on our agenda that we have, hopefully 3 minutes would be enough. I think here's Emily coming in, so we do have a quorum. So right after Mr. Torres and the other speaker, then we can go back and approve the minutes.
Yep. And Mr. Torres, you should be able to unmute your mic by pressing *6, I believe.
Okay, am I on?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Miguel Torres. I've been a longtime resident of Charleston Country Club too. And one of the few concerns that I have is the Harborview Elementary School and the entry into my neighborhood, which is Frampton and then turning on to Burning Tree Road. So what has happened is twice a day during school, the traffic has actually blocked any kind of response, emergency vehicles or any kind of vehicles, including my own, from getting in and out of the neighborhood. This probably goes on for almost an hour every single day. Also, my driveway is blocked. I cannot enter or leave my home but without running into someone and or going against traffic to get in and out of my neighborhood. The next thing is the people picking up their children at school are also blocking the fire hydrants. So even if an emergency happens, I guess by the time they get to my house will probably be in disarray. Also, there's no one really enforcing the law here, where you would think you would have a police officer standing outside on Harborview and or right at the school trying to direct traffic to get all these people safely in and out of the neighborhood. Also, I've noticed that there is like 2 or 3 children. I've seen 3 separate occasions within the past month or so running across Harborview Road, which is a 4-lane highway / road, main road, and unsupervised. I've seen parents dropping off their kids on the other side of the road, parking their cars illegally, walking across and coming onto this side of Harborview to drop their kids off. One of the things are signage in our neighborhood, which is do not stop, do not block, and so forth on one side of our neighborhood. By those signs going up, and we don't know who's responsible for those signs, has stopped all the traffic from actually safely dropping off their children. So now they cannot drop off their children on Inverness no longer. So all of that traffic now has squeezed over to this side of the neighborhood, and traffic is horrendous. It's just a matter of time before someone is hurt and or killed trying to cross the road, and emergency vehicle cannot respond to someone's emergency need. And also just the basic speeding on Harborview Road. I know there's a police officer sits over by the Hess station. I don't know if it's a mannequin inside of our unit or not, but basically it's very rare that you ever see him pull anybody over, and these unmuffled vehicles going by, and you can tell they're accelerating past 50 miles an hour. So we desperately need the help of the police department in any which way they can to help and support us so that we can have a safe and healthy neighborhood. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres, for calling in to share with us that information. I know we've taken notes. I've taken personal notes, and I know Bethany's taken notes as well. And so please stay tuned for addressing of those comments, if not during this meeting, during the next meeting.
Juan, if I may, we will pass that on to our units in the area, and we'll address that immediately.
Thank you.
Well,
And
thank
you
you,
do
sir.
have all of those points that Mr. Jerez brought up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
Juan, our second person that signed up to speak is a gentleman, and his name is Tony. I think the last name is Danielle. And Mr. Danielle, if you are on the line, you can press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello, this is Tony Daniel. How you doing?
Doing
Hey,
well.
good.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It is an honor to be able to speak to you. Thank you very much for allowing citizen participation. I live next door to Miguel, and since I have 3 minutes, I get to tell a story. And here's the story. I'm retired military, and I was stationed in Salt Lake City, And in Salt Lake City, you can park more than 5 feet away from a fire hydrant. I moved from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles, and I got a ticket for parking next to a fire hydrant. I took out a tape measure, measured it. I was 12 feet away from that fire hydrant, marched myself into court, saw the judge, and said, "Judge, I was 12 feet away from the fire hydrant." Said, "Guilty. Got to be 15 feet away from a fire hydrant in California, just like South Carolina." Now, the problem we've got, and I submitted in the comments all the rules in South Carolina that govern the roads. And the rules are, you have to be at least 30 feet away from a flashing yellow light on Harborview Road. You have to be 20 feet away from intersection, 20 feet away from a crosswalk, 15 feet away from a fire hydrant. If you look at Frampton Street in front of Harborview School, there is only room for 2 cars at a time. And what you have during the day is you have cars that are 15 deep on Frampton, 15 to 20 feet deep on Harborview Road, and 15 to 20 feet deep in the median on Harborview Road. Now, all these are violations, and it's been going on for a long time. We have a sign in front of our yard, our driveway on Frampton, that was placed there by the county. This is nothing new. Now, we have asked that the city put signs up. We asked 5 months ago. As Miguel mentioned, they got them in the other part of the neighborhood. We can't seem to get them in ours. But first of all, you need to have the knowledge. That's why I told that story. You need to know that you're breaking the law. You can't stop or park a car in South Carolina within 3 feet of a driveway. My driveway is blocked every day, twice a day. And this is when school's not even busy. Wait till it fills up. So we need signs put up, which is what Miguel talked about. There are other mitigating factors. Mayor Tecklenburg is doing the very best he can to solve that. I've talked to the school. They're going to try and solve some of the problem, but they can't solve this problem. This is by enforcement. And the rules are on the books for a reason. I believe they're there for safety, not just to make money. And if it's a safety problem, then we need to enforce the safety code. But the first thing is give them notice. Tell people they're doing something wrong, and then enforce the code. So tell them, you cannot stop within 3 feet of the driveway. You can't park within 20 feet of an intersection. Can't park within 20 feet of a crosswalk. Sure can't park within 15 feet of a fire hydrant, which happens every day, twice a day, every time school lets in or gets out. Then the other problem is, and I've taken video, to be able to exit the school, you have cars that are 25 deep on the left-hand side going towards the connector. You have cars 15 feet in the median, not supposed to be there, on Harvey Road, and cars have to turn left to go towards the connector. So they're basically playing dodgeball with somebody going 25 or 30 miles an hour. And if you look at all the studies on congestion, that's one of the most dangerous moves you can make, is going through parked cars on a highway to where there are other moving cars. I appreciate you taking notes. I would guess you do the same thing. If you can contact the city and say, hey, please put up the signs to notify the residents that they are not the residents, the participants at the school, that they cannot park on Frampton. It is against the code. By my measurement, there's only room for 2 cars at 15 foot per car. Other than that, you're either too close to the driveway or too close to an intersection or too close to a crosswalk. I thank you very much for listening to me. Hopefully something will happen. I look forward to the signs going up. I look forward to enforcement. And what really brought all this to bear, and my father sitting beside me, is he had a stroke in October. EMS was impeded to get in because of all the traffic. And then when I'd go to see him in the hospital, because of COVID, I couldn't spend the night. And so I'd want to get up in the morning and leave. I couldn't get out of the driveway till 7:20. And sometimes I'd try and go out, and I got the "You're number one" sign from somebody when I ask them to move. They're not real polite out in that blocking the road. They're in a hurry. They're wanting to get to school, and I have empathy for them. I carried my daughter to school every day, but I also obeyed the traffic laws. Thank you very much. You've been very kind, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Danielle, for calling in. And we're happy to be able to report still that Captain Cotella heard everything that you said. And I can tell from his facial expression, he's collecting that information and will act on it just as he stated to Mr. Torres.
Thank you.
Sure. Have a good evening.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye-bye. Council members, we also, although not signed up to speak, I do want to respect the fact that we're fortunate to have joining with us this evening for this meeting, City Councilwoman Carol Jackson from James Island. Thank you so very much for joining in with us, ma'am. Would you like to say anything tonight?
Thank you. I just appreciate all the work that the advisory committee has been doing, and rather than just hearing about it, I thought I would sit in and actually listen to y'all for an evening. I'm so grateful that Ms. Doris Grant has stayed with the group the whole time after she and the mayor and the mayor and I nominated her, and we're very proud to have Doris. I guess one little thing that would follow along with two gentlemen from Country Club 2 were just talking about, this week has been a foreshadowing of how, really hard it is to travel on James Island. We only have essentially 2 streets that go from north to south, and the biggest one is Folly Road that goes all the way to the beach. So it was spring break. It was like beach week. No one could get anywhere on Folly. I saw 2 or 3 like suicide lane accidents or near misses. My concern as a council person that is really just occurring to me after listening to the 2 gentlemen is we have a neighborhood down at the very end of James Island that is now being party to 2 very popular establishments. The Barrel is one of them, and now the Senorita has a longer name than that, but everybody knows them. And they're on Battery Island Road as it intersects Folly. And we've worked with the parking enforcement to set up no parking signs on one side of Battery Island because the cars are everywhere on that street, and it's not a wide enough street to have cars parked on both sides, and especially when they're there all day. Now we can't even get to the parking enforcement stage because Folly Road is so backed up on any given nice day that people are traveling to the beach. So I don't know. I mean, I wish we had a helicopter that could fly over and land a few people who are handing out citations, because it really is a safety issue in these roads that just stay permanently backed up. All day long. I just came home from dropping my grandson off. I was half a mile away from their house to my house, and it took me 20 minutes because basically you get stopped at every light and it's bumper to bumper and people don't let you in, and it's a real problem. So I know it's not anything that's easy to solve, but I do think that we should all be aware about that kind of, congestion and the ways that we have to be creative in enforcing it.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Councilwoman. We really appreciate it. Members, moving backwards, to the approval of our minutes. Since we do have a quorum present, did everyone get a chance to read through the minutes? Is there a motion to accept the minutes, or are there any changes that are required?
Move adoption, Jerry Harris.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been,
I
who
second that.
Okay.
Camden.
Camden, thank you.
Yes,
It's been
ma'am.
properly moved and seconded that the minutes be adopted. You ready for question? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please show thumbs up. Okay, and Camden and Emily, we don't see you. Okay.
Thumbs up.
Okay, good deal. All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, it's been approved then that we will adopt the minutes as printed. Thank you very much. And again, we want to thank those citizens who spoke out to us and Councilwoman Jackson for the time that you took to participate in tonight's meeting. Now we'll move to the subcommittee reports. Just prior to starting the reports, I do want to state that I will be preparing a report next week. I've talked with Bethany, so I will be preparing a report next week to submit to the Public Safety Committee, which is the process that you would do to be able to have a report to go before the council, the city council, to let them know the actions that we have completed to date and the actions that we have pending, just to give them an update on what the CPAC has been doing. I will share that information with you. If you'd like anything added, I will be asking that you respond back pretty promptly. And whatever responses I receive, I will try to incorporate those changes. If I don't receive responses by a specific time that I will state in the email to you, we will go on and forward that information to the Public Safety Committee so that we will be timely in that. Okay? And that falls in line with what the Communication Subcommittee presented at the previous meeting, and the council approved the subcommittee's report. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you. Let's go with the Traffic Stop Committee. Is someone going to report in Joe's stead? It's on the Traffic Subcommittee. Okay, we'll put Traffic Stop, Bethany, on the next agenda.
Okay.
Please continue to keep Joe Lycett and his family in your positive concerns.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
just ask that when the Traffic Stop Committee meets, that they perhaps discuss the SLED report on traffic stops and ticketing, and provide us any comments and observations that they might have in that regard.
okay, and I will ask too, Councilman Harris, that you please send an email to the subcommittee chairman, Joe Lycett, to let him know that.
Will do.
Thank you, thank you. Communication Subcommittee, Councilman Tamburino?
Yes, Madam Chair. Our minutes are pretty thorough, so rather than rehashing what everybody has available, I'm going to cede my time and take any questions, but I'll cede my time because I see we have a lot of updates and I'd rather us have more time on updates. So if anybody has any questions, I'm here.
Thank you. Any questions concerning the Communication Subcommittee report? Any additional comments?
Okay, then.
Thank you, Councilman Tamburino. That lets you know that your report was very concise, and I think everybody fully understands all that is listed there. If you do have any questions, though, outside this meeting, please make sure that you email to Councilman Tamburino so that he will have an opportunity to address or at least present it at the next subcommittee's meeting. Policy and Procedures Subcommittee, Councilman Milliken?
Hey everyone, yeah, I actually wasn't able to be present at the last policy and procedures meeting. I found out I had to take an exam during the exact same time that the meeting was scheduled for, about 30 minutes before the meeting was supposed to start.
Okay.
But I did I emailed out some notes from that meeting, and really we just discussed the 2020 complaint data. And I think, I'm not sure if it's an agenda item tonight, but there's some revisions that were made to that that Mr. Rumelin mentioned he might add tonight. And then we also discussed the policy directives review process, and you know, just more discussion on what that's going to look like as far as the policy and procedure subcommittee's role and CPAC as a whole, our role, and kind of how the department's going to create that schedule, and as far as like more in-depth policing information that maybe all members of council don't know, how we can be up to speed, so we can be informed during that review process.
Thank you. The complaints process is listed under chief's updates.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
I'm quite sure that we'll get to that. I did have that underlined as one of my questions from your notes, from your minutes. Thank you very much. Any other questions for the Policy and Procedures Committee?
Madam Chair, just wanted to amplify and highlight one aspect. Captain Cretella reviewed with us the process and procedure for reviewing the 78 directives of the department over a 3-year period. From my engagement and involvement, I think we as a council need to rethink our deployment of our bodies. If there are at least 20 or 30 of the directives that may be being reviewed on an annual basis. Our three committees are not responsible. I think we may need to be think through a kind of more rapid response and or prioritizing those that we might want to comment on. I just wanted to highlight that. If you reviewed, and I know we're going to be talking about the annual report on the racial bias audit, the back appendix lists each of those policy directives and a schedule for reviewing them. And I would just urge the members of the council to look on those that they have some interest in or some expertise in, and for us to have a conversation about how we might be able to be more helpful, more responsive and interactive with the department in updating those directives.
So has the Policy and Procedures Committee developed a recommendation that might not have gotten in the minutes that were submitted forward?
So
is that a recommendation coming from that subcommittee?
It was not in the form of a recommendation. I think we did not vote out. There were two things that we discussed that I think are relevant here. One had to do with the criteria that the department used in deciding which was 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year review. And it had to do with various dimensions of a cycle. And that's not outlined in the directive. So we recommended to the department that they take a look at that. And then secondly, there was a suggestion that in addition to simply identifying what year a particular, what particular cycle year there would be a review, there might be a first, second, or third quarter projection. That was a suggestion, it was really made to the department and not brought forward for council action.
Thank you. Any other questions for the Policy Procedure Committee, subcommittee? Any further action the council wants to take regarding the additional comments from the Policy Procedure Subcommittee? Okay, thank you. We'll move now to the updates on the illumination project.
Hello, if possible, may I share my screen?
You should be able to, Wendy.
All right. I have a very brief PowerPoint here. So here's where we're at. We shared the annual report and the illumination project final report in January with the expectation that we would receive feedback so that it could all be finalized for this meeting. I just received some additional feedback from KGM last night. And so I did not have time to incorporate all of that feedback into the report. I will get that done as soon as possible, and then we can make the reports public. Basically, just to give you an overview of the report from where we're at, the report itself is meant to be a progress report intended to share the status of implementation. It does not supplant or replace the analysis that was done by CNA or the analysis that's done in the annual public professional standards office report that Captain Cretella produces. And so that report provides analysis for the things that are monitored by PSO, which include use of force and complaints. And I believe he is very close to wrapping up the 2020 report, which will be coming out soon. So the audit report was just intended to show where we were at with implementing the recommendations. The recommendations were classified as simply as possible, as complete, partially complete, or in progress. And one piece of feedback was that we didn't define what those mean. So for this audience, I marked something as complete if it was an action that CNA recommended, that the department implemented, and there was no need for further action. So for example, one of those recommendations was to include a sanctity of life statement in all of the use of force policies. The department added that statement to the use of force policies, published the use of force policies, and we marked that recommendation as complete. That doesn't mean they're going to stop working on the use of force policy. That will continuously evolve. But that specific recommendation made by CNA was completed by the department. Some of the recommendations did not give easy to measure benchmarks. So one of the recommendations was to increase community engagement. And that's not something that we could easily say is a completed task. It'll take, I think, a while and some deeper evaluation to say that. Some of the recommendations were listed as partially complete because maybe CNA recommended in one recommendation that we do two things, and one of those things is done, but the other thing still needs to happen. And so I attached to that report all the relevant policies that were updated as a result of the audit, and some other documentation, as Jerry mentioned, with the schedule of policies to be reviewed. So this is where I was at, and this is going to change, to be very honest. I got some great feedback from Doris, who made some suggestions about the way that we classified some of the recommendations. Some were classified as complete, but we're going to continue to do more work on them. So we're going to move that to partially complete. So you'll see a smaller percentage of completion, a higher percentage of partially complete, and then in progress, it means that, you know, we haven't actually met any part of the recommendation yet. So this was breaking down the progress by section with the 1-year status, and the report itself is broken down into 5 different sections. So I included this to kind of remind you that these are the things that we're working on. One of the biggest things, and we've had our CIU supervisor come and explain it at this meeting, one of the biggest challenges is the way we collect traffic stop data, and we're still working on that. However, we made some achievements in 2020, and they were mostly focused on framework and foundation. There were organizational and policy recommendations were implemented first, because we needed to do that in order to build the framework to promote success in the audit. Part of that was aligning the traffic division under the same part of the department as community outreach. And then the department developed the 5-year strategic plan, which incorporated both the racial bias audit recommendations and the illumination project recommendations. And then obviously one of the huge achievements for 2020 was the CPAC subcommittees created to address some of the audit recommendations. And I don't have to explain those to this group because you guys have done all the hard work of making that happen, and we appreciate it. So there was an implementation budget that came with audit implementation, and we really focused on using that funding in a thoughtful way to meet some of the, or to create some of the tools to help us achieve the audit recommendations. And that was split into 2 chunks. One was, to work with some really smart people in universities. And then the other was to acquire some tools to help us do that. The Q Markets tool, which is in the process of implementation, is that crowdsourcing tool that I shared with you. And that's because a number of the audit recommendations tell us that we should publish the strategic plan and seek community feedback or input. And this tool will give us the ability to do that. We'll be able to park the traffic plan or the traffic strategy out there and open it up for people to give input and then collect that input in an easier way than asking people to send us emails or come to a meeting. And then the final thing is we signed an MOU with a group called the Justice Innovation Lab in collaboration with the solicitor to conduct some analysis on things like arrests and prosecutions and stops. And so that is a kind of a major project that's going to take some time to actually get to the implementation part or the analysis and reporting back part. But the director of that organization is really motivated to work with us. He is a former federal prosecutor and he has a lot of expertise in this area. So what the report doesn't talk about, and now that we're 3 months or 4 months into 2021, this is kind of a little bit difficult. The report was created in November of last year. So it doesn't talk about some things that we've done after November that are really critical. And one of those was the implementation of traffic stop data collection using field contact cards. Captain Bruder was the driving force behind that. He got that done. He tested it with his group, and then he's been really, he's worked really hard on that project. And so there's some challenges here. It's not going to be perfect, but we've asked our officers to create a field contact card for every self-initiated stop. So if they pull over a car, if they stop someone on a bicycle, or they stop someone walking down the street. One of the challenges here, and I talked to Captain Bruder about this today, is defining when to actually complete this card, and then trying to align that to our dispatch data to make sure it's being done when it should be done. And Captain Bruder pointed out a really good scenario in that there are times when something's going on, an officer contacts a citizen, they have some kind of engagement, but the action doesn't rise to the level of collecting that person's information or creating a record about the interaction. And a lot of these cases are times where if we require the officer to then collect that information and create a record for that interaction, it would become intrusive. They would be asking a citizen for their identification or their information in a situation where they don't really need to. And in our opinion, there are times when the police can talk to a citizen and not create a record, and that's in the citizen's best interest. If it rises to the level of a detention or an investigative stop, or there's an enforcement action, then we absolutely create that record. So we're trying to figure out just kind of making sure that we're getting that information at all the right times, but we're not becoming overly intrusive in order to create these records. The next big thing in 2021 is we've hired our social media manager. We're really excited. He's on board now. I think I'm allowed to announce who he is. His name might be a little familiar to some of you. It's Harv Jacobs, formerly of Channel 5. And so he has a lot of expertise and experience in public communication. And one of his areas of expertise is being able to tell stories in a very short period of time, because that is the job of the media, is to be able to give you complex information in a very direct and short way. And so I've asked him for his advice and help, because as you know, nothing I say is ever short. And then the third thing is the implementation of CPOP and Q markets. CPOP is our project with Professor Haberman, and that's the community problem solving project. The Q markets is the crowdsourcing project. That problem solving project is moving into the training phase. And then what we hope to do is equip all of our officers with the ability to identify and work with community partners to solve problems rather than just approach everything with enforcement. Enforcement might be part of problem solving. It doesn't completely replace enforcement, but it gives us the opportunity to maybe look for alternatives. And finally, with the illumination project, as a reminder, I didn't get any feedback specifically on the illumination project report, but this is kind of an overview of that. And what I did with the illumination project is I looked at all of this, there were more than 80 strategies recommended by the illumination project. And I looked at those and I asked questions to find out what happened to these strategies. Are we still doing them? Did we do them and stop doing them, or did we complete whatever the strategy was? And so this is what I found. This was the breakdown of it. I found that at least half of those strategies recommended by the illumination project are rolled into the strategic leadership plan. So they've been like baked into the DNA of the department. Another 38% of those strategies were also addressed by the racial bias audit. So they are a priority to us as a result of that. We completed 19%, and then 20% were discontinued or uninitiated, and 31%. And you'll notice this doesn't add up to 100. It's not meant to. These are overlapping assessments. And I noted that 31% of the strategies were intended for citizen implementation, because it seemed to me that one of the biggest challenges to sustaining these strategies was ownership of the strategies. And so some of those strategies that were written for the citizens to implement and take ownership of were actually transferred to the department, and the department took ownership of them, and they're working to make sure that they stay alive. Not all of them were transferable, and some of them were just, not initiated, or they belong to an organization that doesn't report to us, so we don't have a good way of tracking it. That's it. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. That was really very informative. I do have one question. The discontinued or uninitiated strategies, those were discontinued or uninitiated for, do we know the reason why?
Yeah, and that's spelled out in the actual report. Each strategy I investigated and gave a reason for it. A lot of them were things like the illumination project recommended that we create a separate council for a different function, and the department found that it was just too difficult to have a lot of different community organizations. Or you would have community meetings and like one or two people would show up to them. And so some of those things, rather than having 3 different councils to take on 3 different things, we came to CPAC, and we trust CPAC with doing the things that were originally intended by the illumination project to be done by a separate group.
Thank you. And one other that brought to mind the fact that we did want to include photos of the CPAC members in the document. And so the council members, the audiovisual department of the police department has offered to take photos for us on April 12th, April 13th, April 15th, individual photos. Again, those dates are April 12th, April 13th, and April 15th, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 11, or 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. So I'm asking, please, that each council member would avail yourself next week, either on April 12th, 13th, or 15th, between 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., or 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. for your photo to be taken. And the address, the location is the new building that's on Bees Ferry Road. The address is 1975 Bees Ferry Road. Zip code is 29414 if you want to put the information in your GPS or your navigational system in your car. If you are unable to do so, please send an email to me so that we will know. We would hate to put some photos in and then put no photo available for the ones who are unable to go to take the picture. And Chief Reynolds, thank you very much for allowing the audiovisual department to offer that to us. We really appreciate it. Matter of fact, the background will look similar to the background of Captain Bruder's picture that he has on right now. And thank you for doing that, Captain Bruder. That helps me tremendously. Okay. So again, those dates are either the 12th, the 13th, or the 15th of April. That's next week from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. at 1975 Bees Ferry Road, zip code 29414.
Juan, Mr. Harris has his hand up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Councilman Harris?
So, Madam Chair, the presentation on the illumination project, when you read it, and I don't know how many members of the council have read it, many of the community-facing recommendations are forwarded to CPAC. CPAC is the answer to that. I am not at all certain that we have thoroughly embraced that as part of our culture, understanding that we are a success. I know you know it because you went through the entire piece, but the degree to which there is community-facing concerns, to the degree to which the illumination project emerged out of questions of racialized disparities and equal justice, and to a certain extent, the racial bias audit speaks to the same set of questions. I'm not certain that we've come to grips with how we organize ourselves or address ourselves to that work, since that is now part of our charge. And one of the things that I have been urging, and I've mentioned this on a couple of prior occasions, us revisiting the guidelines, particularly the section that talks about the actions that the council are suggested to undertake, to make certain that we've incorporated our successor function for the illumination project and fully incorporated those aspects associated with the racial bias audit as well. Just a point.
Right, that's the reason why one of the accomplishments that you saw listed in what Wendy showed us is the fact that we have been able to establish some subcommittees to work on some of those issues. And I think it's critical for us to continue to work on the subcommittees as well as develop others to tackle some of those other issues. We do know that there are a lot of issues that are listed there. And if you haven't gotten a chance to read the report, I know Wendy mentioned that she received comments from Councilwoman Doris Grant. If you get a chance to, you are past the point, we're past the point for submitting comments. However, you can still avail yourself to read the information so that you could get that level of understanding Councilman Harris is talking about, because it is important, I believe, for us to try to work as many issues as we can. We do have other members on the council who are not right now on a subcommittee, so there's opportunity to be tackling some of those additional issues. Thank you for bringing that point out, Councilman Harris.
Just one other additional point in her report, Wendy identified a series of technical assistance, data collection related activities. And in our current configuration of committees and structure, we don't, in my opinion, have the kind of rapid response and interaction that may be suggested there. And perhaps, Madam Chair, you and Paul can chat about that with Wendy and try and figure out how we might create some kind of a structure so we're interfacing with those folks that are doing those projects, so that we can be, if we have subject matter experts or even perspective, that we can be involved in engagement. That I think that generally falls in the area of data collection and compilation and analysis.
And actually listening to you say that, it does border itself into the communication subcommittee, of which you are a member as well. So that might be something, Councilman Tamburino, we can add to the agenda for the communication subcommittee meeting, because that is more so a communications aspect than just data collection and data manipulation. Councilman Tamburino, I see you nodding your head. Thank you very much. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. So then let's move. Any other comments about the illumination project or one-year audit? Thanks again, Wendy Stiver, for sharing that with us. And I hope everyone got a chance to really digest it. Okay, for the Virtual Citizens Academy, I know Captain Thompson was not able to join us tonight, but he did send me some information. So CPAC members, I need your help here. He has been able to plan 4 sessions instead of 6, 4 weeks where we can have a Citizens Academy for the CPAC. We would be able to invite one family member or a friend to attend with each one of us. The options are October dates, the 6th, 13th, 20th, and the 27th, or December, the 1st, 8th, 15th, and 22nd. So again, if we did it in October, those would be the 4 dates, and the times would be from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. It is anticipated that the sessions will be in person following COVID-19 protocols. So what I need tonight is a vote from the council as to which one of those sets of sessions we would like Captain Thomas to go ahead and firm up for us. And this would be the opportunity where those who did not get a chance to participate in ride-alongs, which I think the majority of the council members now did not get a chance to participate in those. So you would be able to avail yourself to these 4 sessions, and it's a package. It's the 4 sessions in October or the 4 sessions in December from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And again, those dates are October 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th, or December 1st, 8th, 15th, and 22nd. Is there a motion from council? Anybody's hand raised? Okay. Councilman Tamburino?
I move for October, please.
Okay, is there a second to that motion for October sessions? Emily, you said second? Do you have a question, Councilman Harris, or you just?
Jerry loves October.
He was seconding.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that the sessions, the set of sessions that we accept, October 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th. Are we ready for discussion? Question? All those in favor of the October date, 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th for the Citizens Academy, please thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay. All right, that's 8. Gotcha, Cam. Ryan, did you vote? Not yet? Okay, so that's 8 for the October. All those opposed, please use the same sign, unfortunately. One in opposition. Those abstaining? Because I did notice there were 2 of us who did not vote. So does that mean that you are willing to be able to do October?
I think everyone thumbed up except Ryan.
Ryan did on the nay.
Yes, but I think everybody else had their thumbs up.
Okay, Frank, you did vote? Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, then we're good to go. So our Citizens Academy will be October 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th. I'll make sure Captain Thompson knows that. And please stay tuned to emails to remind us of that fact. And again, the times are 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Many thanks to Captain Thompson for working that out for us, because that's something we've been asking about given this COVID environment. Community engagement.
Paul had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you don't
Yes,
mind,
sir.
I'm going to follow up with Captain Thompson to make sure that if one of the council members can't get into the October one, if they can be scheduled for the November, for the subsequent one, because I believe he's going to have more than one. Ours, I think, was just truncated due to the fact that we don't need one of the classes.
Okay, I'm looking at the email that he sent me. He did not make that. His email says, please let me know which set of dates works best for the group. So I believe his intention there is that it would be for the group, one set or the other. Captain Bruder?
I'd briefly talk with Captain Thompson about this in case people had questions. And I think that's, I can speak on his behalf to say, yeah, we're going to do a special one for the CPAC group, but if anybody can't get into that one or has to make up a session or something like that, we can work you into the next regular session. Of course, it won't be as targeted for CPAC, but it will be the regular Citizens Academy. And they typically do those. I think they try to do three a year or so.
Okay.
So maybe after the first year, maybe a little bit after December, but we'll get them into the next time. So
Thank you. Thank you. So Paul, we got that settled. Thank you. All right. Community engagement, Captain Bruder, since you talked with Captain Thompson, is there any additional information you wanted to add on community engagement?
he did not speak to me about that item, but I do know we did start our first, I believe, Citizen Police Advisory Council or Citizen Academy last night. We had our first go last night, and there were several speakers to that last night. So,
how was the attendance? Just curious.
Chief, I think they had a full class. I think they had a good response for a full class for that.
Yeah, it was a very engaged group. And I think because of the COVID, I'm not sure, but I think they're trying to keep it a little bit smaller than groups in the past. But we had a great time last night with the group that was there. A little bit smaller, I think, than what we had, but I think that was somewhat intentional.
Gotcha. And Chief, really, we're actually at the point of your update, so you can continue on for us, sir. Thank you. Thanks, Captain Bruder.
So I'm going to highlight some areas from the after action report that was done. It was titled Strengthening Charleston, an assessment of the Charleston Police Department's response to the May 30th and 31st, 2020 protests and riots. October 8th of 2020, CPD presented preliminary report to the Public Safety Committee. This was a 63-page comprehensive report containing an overview of events and an after-action review of CPD's response to protests and riots of May 30th and May 31st. Following the presentation, committee members requested additional information to include the following: anecdotal information from citizens, business owners, property owners, bystanders, and other third-party observers regarding their experiences during those 2 days, as well as a request for additional property damage information to include fire damage. The final report was updated and some new sections were added to include updates to the arrest section. The damage assessment section was updated and some new subsections were added for building damage, fire damage, and some other police incident report information. There was a new chapter for community feedback, a new section for the chief's final thoughts, property damage map and fire incidents lists were updated. There was a new synopsis under the synopsis section, and now the report was 84 pages long with updated information on additional arrests that have been made. And I will say, as a side note, one of the cases that was federally adopted and is being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office actually was going to come today and be heard as a plea, and it got postponed, but I actually was going to be present and speak if given an opportunity in terms of impact on our city, impact on the police department, impact on our residents from, in this particular case, it was an arson to one of our vehicles. And that was the person that was arrested and charged federally for that case. There was updates to the damage assessment to include a highlight that there was no deaths or serious injuries. There was 136 visual surveys of building damage, which was showed on a new map that was added to the report. There was 82 businesses on Upper King Street, 20 on Lower King Street, 10 in Market area, 9 in the Queen Street area, 8 in the Meeting Street area, and 7 on west of King. Generally, the types of businesses that were damaged and affected included bars and restaurants, retail, convenience stores, pharmacies, hotels, galleries, spirits and tobacco shops, other small businesses, and the majority of the damage was to restaurants and bars, 87% of which was shattered and broken windows and doors, and the remaining was fire and graffiti. The fire damage, there was 22 fires, 20 of which were intentionally set and 2 others categorized as cause unknown. And the greatest amount of property damage was to the Family Dollar, the Sherwin-Williams, and West Elm. The Charleston Fire Department estimated for the purposes of the report that property that was saved and protected included an estimate of almost $25 million and the contents being over $3 million. But there was, of the police incident reports, 104 incident reports from property damage, 47 of which included burglaries, 42 vandalisms, 11 arsons, and some other assorted crimes. What has happened since then? Now a total of 89 parade permits issued from July 9th, 2020 to December 31st at the end of the year. And there have been many since then. At the time of our update, there had been 60, but there's been many more since then. Jason can probably give us an update of the number in this current year, 2021. We also, in the community feedback session, we reached out to Citizen Police Advisory Council, of course, the business and neighborhood services, the neighborhood associations, members of city council to obtain volunteers to tell stories and provide feedback regarding CPD's response to the events. During October 28th Public Safety Committee meeting, citizens called in for comment, and the deadline to provide information was extended through the end of the year to December 31st. We received in that time frame 28 responses, 1 from the member of clergy, 2 from associated with the college, 7 business owners, and 18 citizens, and numerous stories within that group, and criticisms and complaints. We received, investigated 15 complaints and reviewed extensive hours of body worn camera video. And there was also a section within the report where I made some final thoughts and observations and comments. That's my overview for the after action report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Council members? I'm looking around. Councilman Harris, you're talking, I think. Are you talking?
Just really quickly, Chief, given what's happening in Minnesota, the case and the anxiety about the outcome, any lessons learned or preparation or help that we may be able to provide you in getting ready for whatever the response, the community response might be to that situation?
Yeah, you know, Jerome, you always have phenomenal questions, and I think that's probably of the entire night a question that hits the sweet spot. There's people throughout our community, throughout our region, throughout our state, throughout our country, throughout the world, frankly, that are following every day the 24-hour coverage of this trial of the killing of George Floyd. And it is reliving the pain of that murder and the moments where The officer, Chauvin, who's on trial, among others, had his knee on George Floyd's neck. And I said it days after that occurred. And I'll say it again, it was despicable what that officer did. It was wrong. It wasn't consistent with any practice or any policy that I'm aware of, other than a violation of the criminal code, frankly. And that any agency would support, or it wasn't consistent from what I can hear from their chief, from their trainers, and from others, that it was not consistent with any of their training, with their policies, or any of their practices, that it wasn't acceptable. And so, but more specifically, I think it's important for me to state that, but more specifically, as people watch and relive that moment in our country, that embarrassing, despicable moment, it has got people very angry once again. And if there was any break or lull in the anger, it has been re-heightened, from a racial perspective, from an equity perspective, from a violence perspective. And so I don't think we can avoid talking about these issues. We have to, and this hits at the very core of what we do, how we do it, why we do it. And I gotta say, one of the things that I heard a little bit from the commentators about that chief in Minneapolis is, wow, isn't it great that we have a chief that's finally willing to speak up and call it like it is? Well, I take a little bit of exception to that, in that there's many chiefs that are willing to speak up, and I'm one of them, and to call it like it is. And frankly, I will not wear this badge the day that I'm unwilling to speak up and call out despicable actions, hold ourselves accountable, to set a very high bar and a very high standard for what we do, how we do it, why we do it. I believe in our profession. I believe in the men and women in this organization and what we do and how we do it. And I have a very high expectation that we do it right. Not perfectly, we make mistakes, but a criminal act like that, I promise you, he's not the only chief who's called out a rogue officer who has behaved in such a terrible way. And I'd say that's the worst I've ever seen, but I've seen a lot of bad things over the years. And I think it's important to acknowledge the significance of this moment, this trial, the fact that people are watching it. So that being said, we are watching this very closely. We as a profession, as a city, as a region, as a state, federal, state, local partners are all talking about this. We're following the information, not only in the trial, but what we see people are talking about, the different groups that have stated that they're going to have violence. And there's people on social media, as you all know, that say all kinds of things all the time. And we have to see what and discern and follow that information and share with each other what we feel the threat is. And we have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. We always do that. And so we learned a lot of lessons on May 30th, 2020. And here we are almost a year later, reliving that entire event all over again. And there's a lot of people that are very concerned that we're going to have riots in our cities again, based on what the verdict is. So yes, everybody can do a lot about that, because I think our country was very divided back then. I think we can be more united as a city. And we can learn from this moment, learn from last year, and the faith community, our government leaders, the mayor, and our council are talking quite a bit about our preparation for this, and not just our response to some type of violent event. We need to have a different outcome this time. We need to make sure, and that's what a big part of what the CPAC is all about. That's what the racial bias audit has been all about. That's why we are embracing this conversation, why we are doing our best to grind through this, to make sure that we have policies so that we never have anything like that happen in our city. So that we do have some level of trust, that we have some level of genuine transparency and authenticity, so that we are leading in such a way that we are not creating harm, that we are an asset to and with our communities to help them with the needs of public safety in our city, this great city. And so there's a lot of planning behind the scenes, but I'll tell you, the biggest thing that we can do is communicate and talk about these issues so that we never have an event like that in our lifetimes ever in this city again. So our goal is to communicate, to do outreach, to make sure that we prevent anything like that. And of course, that we're prepared, that we can respond. But preparing and responding after the fact is really not the answer. That's part of the answer. If we have to do that, that's exactly what we'll do. And we're working on all those contingencies. I spoke with Chief Keel on Friday of last week at length. SLED has a very substantial network with our federal and state local partners, and everybody talks. We're actually meeting as a region to discuss how we can work with our communities and how we can make sure that we're prepared and that we're communicating and we're proactive in engaging with our communities. So we can't police our communities by ourselves. We've said that. The whole idea of reimagined policing, when you look at people that are suffering with mental health issues, when you look at homelessness, when you look at the opioids, when you look at so many different issues that our communities are struggling with, the police are not the only game in town. We're not the only ones that can go in and the cavalry that are gonna just set everything right. We have to work closely with all of our partners, and it takes a lot of work, and this is a big part of that effort. And that's probably more than everybody wanted to hear. Jason's on the call, Tony's on the call. They've done a lot. Chief Walker's on the call. Wendy, we've talked extensively about these issues. We have not stopped responding to protests and respecting people's rights. And not to get off track, but I'm very concerned, I will tell you, in the legislature about this constitutional carry amendment, which passed a couple of days ago in the House. It's going to go in the Senate. I'm reaching out to people. I am adamantly opposed to constitutional carry for so many reasons, but I know we don't have enough time to go over all those things tonight. But I will tell you, we need to be engaged in our cities, in our legislature, in our communities to talk. There are so many good people in our communities that do not want a riot again, not just the business community, all of our residential communities. I talk to people all the time. People are on edge. So we need to reassure them that we're paying attention, that we are planning, that we're working on this issue.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much. And I see that Councilman Tamburino has his hand up too.
Jerry stole my question because as people are figuring out, we share a brain most of the time. So I had the same question. So Chief, a lot of what you talked about is great. And you're talking about the planning behind the scenes and the communications behind the scenes. Has your public information office and your new social media director, have you considered the idea that it would probably be a good thing to do a series of public service announcements announcing and addressing proactively the environment, the compassion, but also steps that are going to be taken so that the business leaders are reassured that there's going to be a plan this time, that you're prepared for it, that this is not going to be what we saw a year ago. And that's, for many reasons, that's the big concern everybody has, because they're not all exposed to what steps have been taken. And using the media and things like that proactively to get ahead of this now and say, listen, in light of this, here's some public service announcements.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about at great length. And of course, nothing has stopped since May 30th of last year. Our operational tempo, the number of protests that we have every single week, the focus that we have on those protests, the amount of effort that we give to communicate with all of our communities that are impacted by those protests, and navigating through those First Amendment issues. It's an ongoing thing. This is not a new event. And so this is something that we have to continue to have dialogue on. We absolutely are doing some outreach. We also don't want to create something that doesn't exist yet. There's a lot of anxiety. It's something that we have to talk about, we have to address, But we have to be very careful not to just address one group and not address the other, or just address the idea of, okay, we're not going to have protests, or this is all tied together. Procedural justice is tied into the audit, it's tied into the follow-up to the illumination project, it's tied into the CPAC. All these things are tied in. So there's not any one singular PSA that's going to just, okay, great job. You hit it out of the park with that PSA. Everybody's happy now. We really want to be much more about substance, about timeliness, about relevance, and the importance of what information we do know. And as we get that information and as things emerge, we are going to be sharing that, yes.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? And I do want to thank you in this forum, Chief, for the improved communications that we have experienced, where you've been ensuring that that CPAC is contacted for the officer-involved shootings and any other actions that occur, to allow us to be participants in that discussion and sharing from our perspectives, our various neighborhoods, what feelings are. So that does speak volumes to your leadership. We sincerely appreciate that. We look forward to that continuing, because it's through those kinds of actions that we will hopefully get improved relationships between the police department and the community, and the citizens in the community. We understand that enforcement has to occur. We want to make sure that it's just as you said, that it's done in an enforcing style and not in a style that's to bring about what we are all reliving now through the court case from Minnesota. So thank you very much. We really do sincerely appreciate that. Really do. And with that said, Chief, you can move into any other comments or questions?
Do you mind if Jerry, at the risk of, I don't want to take all of our time on this one question, but do you have thoughts on how we can, as a community, there's obviously a lot the police department needs to do, but I feel like public safety is a community burden. It's not just the police. We all know that. It's a shared responsibility that everybody has. Are there thoughts that you have, and I certainly have some in coordinating with others, the mayor and the people, leaders in the faith community and in our neighborhoods. Nobody wants to have their neighborhood damaged. When I look at the dollar store and just other things that occurred, sometimes the communities that really are struggling already are impacted even more so by events like this. And so there's no easy answer. I don't expect you to just, hey, come up with the magic dust and sprinkle it out there. It doesn't exist. But any reflections on how we can all, to me, I'm very optimistic right now. This trial itself is problematic, but I'm optimistic about where we're headed. But my word of the day of the year is together we will move forward and get a better future, not apart, and not the police department just doing their own thing in the only way that that we want to do it. The only way that we're going to be successful is working together with all of our communities.
No, I don't, Chief, I don't have a specific kind of idea, but I think that in some way, whoever is the lead in the organization, Paul's talked about the media component, the community conversations in terms of who are we talking to, who are the networks that we're talking to, people coming together, sharing, quite frankly, some of the anxiety that I know, or I think I know, I feel, in the sense that the law enforcement family are feeling, and kind of getting folks on the same level, right? And coming up with this is what we want to happen in Charleston, right? This is where we're going, and this is where we're going together, and not doing it in silos. And to the degree that folks on CPAC can be part of that conversation and help figure out how that can happen. And that's my first thing that comes to my mind.
Thanks.
And I think additionally, going back, the members of CPAC actually going back and talking within their neighborhoods, within their various groups, the faith communities that we're members of, the neighborhoods or organizations that we're members of, and sharing that information can help to bring about that positive outcome. The meetings that you have been doing, Chief, right after some incident has occurred, I've looked around at the folks that have been invited to attend those sessions, and it really is a good cross-section of critical masses in the community that can help to get that message across. And I think if you continue to do that, it's going to take some time, yes, but if each person works at it on this council as well, I think the message will change. It just is going to take some time, and it's just so sad that we're at this point right now with the court case being played again. You know, everything starting all over again. It just kind of brings up all of the feelings again. Paul, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, we're pretty, I would say we're pretty well represented for our neighborhoods. And Chief, you've got a good connection of clergy and community leaders, and we each represent a district, and then you got the 2 high school leaders. The thing that's always a gap for me in the activism side is your college campuses that are not represented by any of this. And you're talking about, that's a big age for activism and being involved in the protests, and it's the right age demographic too for a lot of sometimes the bad things that we see. So potentially when this verdict comes out and when different things happen, a lot of those college kids, a lot of them come from out of town, so they're not affected by the local clergy and things like that. Making sure that we have an outreach to the groups onto these college campuses to make sure that the same message that you're giving to our local community is going to that community that's kind of isolated from a lot of the community outreach that's done.
Great, thank you.
And Chief, you want to go on and talk, well, we've talked a little bit about officer-involved shootings, but not in great detail, and then the CALEA audit and the complaint process with the time that we have left.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So so I want to just reference our protocol, and I'll explain our protocol, and then I'll touch on the 3 officer-involved shootings that we've had. I believe, and I've been told, and Tony or Cheeto, Jason, help me out if you have anything to add, but in approximately a 10-year period, we had 5 officer-involved shootings, to give you kind of a general idea of how many we might have in the past. We had 3 officer-involved shootings in a just a little over 2-month period, starting at the end of last year, at late December was our first one. And I'll talk about those three briefly. They're all, the Bridgeview one is the one that occurred in December. And that's the only one that's been kind of cleared at this point. The others are still under investigation. And I'll talk about the protocol that I think is important that everybody hears what we will do in these cases moving forward. One, we will respond to the scene of the incident immediately. And I personally, unless for some reason I'm out of town or unable to do that, will always be on the scene. And I think everybody in this call has been on all of the scenes of each one of these. But we're going to go out immediately and be on the scene and coordinate and notify an independent investigative body, which in our state, in our region, is SLED. We will make a statement. I specifically, within a couple hours on the scene, will make a statement about what we know to make sure that we at least share what we know. There's not always everything that we can share, but we'll share what we know. And then within a day, which is usually the following day, we will do another meeting with our stakeholders, which is what Twan was talking about, that we've done each of these 3. It's a protocol that we created, that we've implemented, that we're trying to be consistent about. And in that meeting, we will talk to our stakeholders about what the investigative process is. We can't always answer all the questions because it's so early. When you have an incident like that, there's so much we need to do to protect the integrity and the independence of an investigation like that. So there's a lot that goes into that investigation. SLED responds out immediately, and unless they're somehow otherwise busy on another incident and don't have the resources, they always do their own crime scene processing, forensics, their own crime scene team and techs that come out. They do the interviews, they get the body camera footage, which is obtained by them, and a whole variety of other things. And there's a protocol in writing that's been, a lot of people have had input on it. The defense attorneys, the prosecutors, the police chiefs and sheriffs and different agencies, detectives, investigators have had input in creating a protocol of how these will be investigated and making sure that they're done with clarity, with professionalism, that they're thorough, that they're timely. And amongst the protocol that's been developed, SLED has agreed that they'll do their investigation within 60 days, which seems like a lot, but it's actually, that's pretty quick in my experience. I've seen them take 2 or 3 years. That's not uncommon in a lot of other jurisdictions. So they've committed to doing their investigation within 60 days. And then the solicitor, Scarlett Wilson, has agreed under the auspices of this detailed protocol that she coordinated, and it's very well done, that everybody's agreed to participate in, as long as it's done with those standards in mind and everything has been adhered to. Then Scarlett will make a decision whether there's going to be any criminal charges against the officers involved. There's always a criminal review, and whenever there's a critical incident like an officer involved shooting, that's standard practice. Parallel to that, there's also a administrative investigation by our Internal Affairs Division, and that's something that Tony Crutella is on the line. He's the director of our Internal Affairs Division. We call our Professional Standards Office. And we incorporate things like training, policy issues, lessons learned. There's always an after action to review what are the things that we can learn from, things that could have been done differently or done better. There's always, no matter how well something's handled, there's always room for improvement. So that's the process. That's important, so that if you see something, you kind of begin to know what to expect. This is what the chief's going to do. I think it helps the officers, it helps the community and everybody understand. And there's a level of transparency that we've committed to. One of the things that we also do is within 72 hours, and usually it's maybe around that time frame, maybe even a little bit sooner, we release the officers' names. That's something that has been requested. It's something that eventually gets out. It's something that SLED and other agencies always do, but not all agencies do that. But we've committed to that because we believe that, one, the officers' names are going to get out eventually, and we don't need that to be the story. There's a lot of sensitivity behind that, though, because when we release the officers' names, that affects their family, that affects them. There's some people that might get on social media and attack them or their family. Maybe their spouse works in a school or wherever. So there's a lot of things to be considered before we do that, so that the family has an opportunity to react to that, to the fact that that's going to happen. It's really can be very traumatic to have your officers' names released in a critical incident like that. So there's a lot that goes into that discussion, that preparation, but that's part of our protocol. I'll tell you, SLED, as an example, their officers know ahead of time, and our officers know this ahead of time. We've talked about it a lot this year, especially, and kind of so that everybody knows, if they're new to our department, they didn't know that already, that that's our practice. But SLED actually automatically releases the names immediately. They don't wait. They don't wait a day or 2 or 3. They just, the names go out. If somebody is involved in an incident like that, they know that their names are going to be released. So that's something that we have to work through and just find the right balance, be sensitive, but also make sure that we're being, to the degree that we can, on the main basic issues, that we're being transparent. But at the same time, we're also looking out for our officers, their families, and other things related to that. So specific to these 3 incidences, we had the first one in Bridgeview. We had a 28-year-old subject. We got called to the apartments for a domestic violence related call. where a female in an apartment was afraid, she was in fear, and she called us to help. There was reference to a gun that the suspect had. In this case, this suspect who had been spent the majority of his life in prison, 8, I think, out of 10 years of his adult life, he was in prison for a variety of other significant, serious criminal charges. He was not supposed to be carrying among those other felony violent charges. He was not supposed to have in his possession a weapon. He had a rifle, a long gun, which he fired at the officers, and he also had a handgun. One of the officers was struck with a round. Thankfully, it actually hit his nameplate and hit his vest, and he was not further injured from that shot. That individual approached the officers. There was an exchange of gunfire, and the suspect was deceased on the scene. The second incident that we had was an incident where I'm getting my incidents mixed up a little bit, where an individual was in Georgetown and committed a murder. He killed his child's, his former girlfriend, his baby's mother's new boyfriend. He killed him violently and fled and stole some property, and he was on the run for a few days. At some point in Mount Pleasant, he did a carjacking, an armed carjacking, where he pistol whipped a gentleman pretty severely, injured him, and stole his car. The next day, he, on Rutledge Avenue downtown in the city, put a gun in the face of another individual and threatened his life and stole his car. Our officers were very quick in taking the report and in coordinating with our investigators, and through a variety of means. They were on surveillance shortly after that on Meeting Street, just outside of the city, heading into North Charleston, and tried to stop his car. His car fled briefly, crashed into a phone pole, a telephone pole, and there was an exchange of gunfire where a shot was fired at the suspect, who was armed, and he was given life-saving attention, ironically, from the officer involved in that. And that case is still being investigated by SLED, and we do not want to taint their investigation, and we don't want to do anything that would affect their investigation. But that individual was injured severely and was and I said this the day of the shooting. The officer involved did extensive life-saving treatment on that individual, who's still alive today and is receiving medical treatment. The third shooting that we had an individual on Mary Adair Avenue, right in West Ashley area, and that individual fired we got a call from a very scared and concerned citizen, and saying that this gentleman had a rifle and was threatening people and was agitated, and he just wasn't really making much sense, and he was scaring everybody. And that individual was barricaded in his home. We responded. We evacuated a lot of the neighbors out of the adjacent apartments. And as we were setting up, he fired upon one of our officers. The officer exchanged fire with that individual, who was struck, and they administered first aid. And I'm giving you the very brief version. Again, this is still under investigation, and that individual is still in care and rehabilitation from being shot. That is our protocol. Those are the 3 incidents that we have. I will tell you, as a chief and as a citizen, that's a lot of officer-involved shootings. That's a lot of violent people carrying guns. I've talked about this before we had any of these shootings, that I'm very concerned about the increase in shootings and violence in our city, and the people that are carrying guns that have prior lengthy violent criminal histories, that are carrying guns and they're shooting up our communities. We're arresting them every day. We're working with the solicitor. We're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're working with all of our partnering agencies, federal, state, and local. We've worked with the sharing information with the bond judges and others about some of the acute problems that we're having with gangs and other issues. Why do I say that in the context of this? We need to do everything we can to keep our citizens and our community members safe. These instances easily could have ended very differently. I am convinced that that suspect from Georgetown who did that murder, who's on this violent spree, would have killed somebody else or injured somebody seriously if we had not stopped him. I'm thankful that we did stop him and nobody else did get seriously injured. Each one of these has an element of that, and I believe that we can prevent further future injuries like this. And so we have to work with the gang issue, with prevention. We're working with education. We're working in the schools. We're doing mentoring. We're doing a whole lot of things to make sure that these gangs, some of which are from LA, they have outside influences from New York. They're very organized, they're armed, and they're very violent. And they're involved in the drug trade. They're involved in retaliation shootings and other things like that. And thank goodness that we don't have a dead cop right now, or two, or three, or a dead citizen based on the facts and circumstances of each one of these events. So we have a lot of work to do in our communities, together with our communities. And I can tell you that there's mainly, and we have a very safe city, despite everything I'm saying, we have a very safe city, but we have to work hard to keep it that way. There's been an increase in violent crime, not just here, but throughout our country over the past year. We're paying very close attention to that. Our officers are working diligently in those areas every single day to make sure that we're working hard to get that small number of violent criminal offenders not only under arrest, but we need to keep them in jail. I'm all for sentence reform. I'm very much in favor of disrupting the pipeline to prison. I'm very much in favor of alternative forms of punishment other than jail. I don't think jail is a very productive way of helping people rehabilitate, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some people that are violent and they're repeat offenders and they're harming our cities and our citizens. And those people not only need to be arrested, but they need to be kept in jail so they no longer reoffend, so that they don't hurt themselves or others. That's my officer involved shooting overview. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just noticed that I got a message across the screen. I'm muted. I was asking any council members had any questions?
I had a question. I have a question for the chief. You talk about the rise of gun violence and gangs in our communities. And from a police stance, you know, the typical citizen really don't know what's going on in our community on that level. How do we get that information out in the community regarding, well, I know in James Island, we've had 3 shootings probably in the past 6 months. But how do we get information out in our communities about what to look for regarding gang activities?
Doris, we would love to do a presentation for your community. If you set up a meeting, and we can do it Zoom, or we can do it in any number of different ways. I think with COVID, it's inhibited a lot of our meetings about things like this, but we're, you know, a lot of people are getting vaccinated. We're beginning to get past some of those barriers. And so we have a product that we can deliver, that we can talk about. And because I'll tell you, I think we need to talk about this. And I'm glad you asked that question. there's a lot of people that would say, we don't have a gang problem. It's not, we shouldn't, almost like we shouldn't talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist. And frankly, that's not very effective. And so we are talking about it a lot. We've done presentations in the last 6 months in particular. We've done presentations with our solicitor's office, with our U.S. Attorney's office, with a lot of our partners around the region, and actually a lot of different groups. And so we think that would be beneficial, because if they're recruiting your kids, you want to know that, right? You want to know what are some things that we can look out for. What are warning signs? Is graffiti, is that a problem? If it is, how can we report it? Who do we report it to, so you can get a tracking of it? And so that you can, we want to abate those things and get rid of that graffiti as quickly as we can. But at the same time, we want to have it for investigative value. So the more that we have this dialogue, I think the more that we can coordinate. And again, I feel like it's a small number of people that are creating disproportionately a lot of this havoc. And James Island is a great area that we could talk about, and some of the impacts that this is having are significant. And we're making a lot of arrests, but we can't arrest our way out of this problem. We have to coordinate with all of our community groups. We've reached out to the schools. We're doing some presentations in the schools as well.
All right, well, I look to hear from you about how we can address this on a community level.
Yeah, if you send me an email, I'd love to get something set up, and we'll start with your community.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Grant. Councilman Milligan, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to comment on some of the things the chief was saying. Yeah, I think Chief Reynolds, there was an event that we had with Reverend Middleton, and the county sheriff's office was there too. I don't remember if it was part of the illumination project, but I know that a lot of members of the community really benefited from that meeting, and appreciated that the city police department came out and was there as well. And I believe you spoke at that meeting too. But I just wanted to say, I know that I'm from James Island, so I know that a lot of the residents there have confusion between which municipality is actually their law enforcement division. And I know that the sheriff's department is on contract with the town of James Island with Sheriff's Island Patrol. So they give a report at every town of James Island town council meeting. But I was thinking maybe the department could consider including team, I don't know if it's team 2 or 3, but whichever is James Island, maybe those officers could start attending and giving some sort of status update on any type of action that's been on James Island, just because I know that distinction is confusing. And I think that stakeholders would like to hear from both departments at those meetings.
Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion, Max, and I agree. And I think, I know Cheetah's on here. I'm sure he's taking notes as we're talking, and we will do that. I think that's a great suggestion, and it's good timing for it.
Chief, excuse me, that brings up, that reminded me of the fact that you're working on a strategic planning video. I know it was in our minutes from the last meeting, and I think the plan is that would be shared during neighborhood meetings.
Yep.
So maybe there's a way to also allow for discussions to happen in those neighborhood meetings with either you present or one of the members, one of the other officers present, to do just what Doris and Max were talking about. I know,
Yep.
I believe Captain Thompson is working on that.
Yep. He's out of
Moving
town
last time.
on a well-deserved vacation this week. I'm glad he finally got away, but
Right.
he is, and I think that's imminent.
Good. Any other comments or questions for Chief?
Chief, I have a question. It seemed for a while, and I don't know if this is still the case, that there was like a big problem with people leaving their cars unlocked and guns being stolen from cars. I saw it all the time on our neighborhood groups. Is that still a big issue? And is there a way that we can get word out other than just telling people to keep their guns inside, not in the car? Is that contributing ongoing to the problem that you see?
It is, and if all of our commanders were on the call right now, they'd be clapping. Just the fact that you even asked that question. They get on social media, on our neighborhood watch listservs. I mean, I forwarded articles around. Whenever I talk to the media, I usually mention that somewhere in my interview. And I just don't know the answer to why not only leaving valuables and to include guns in cars, which happens regularly, and the gangs, literally, that's how they're getting a lot of their weapons, and we're weaponizing them by our irresponsibility. But I'll tell you, even things like auto theft, people leave their key fobs in their cars all the time, and it's not just here; it's all around the country. There's part of the research has shown the reason why auto theft numbers went up significantly is because of key fobs, and people just want to leave them in their cup holders, and somebody goes along and they open the car door and just drive off with the car. It happens almost nightly. I mean, it happens regularly. So I go to community meetings. We talk about it all the time. All of our lieutenants, our captains, our commanders go to the community meetings. We talk about this a lot. I was in a meeting right before the COVID hit. I remember it well, and it was a large group of people in a residential neighborhood. And one of the community members was upset because we suggested that there was a lot we could do to prevent being victims. And one of them was to lock our doors and take our valuables inside, just like we're talking about. And this particular community member was upset and said, "You're victim blaming. You know, you're victim blaming. I should have the right to leave my keys in my car and my valuables in my car." And it was kind of a self-correcting problem because the entire community said, "No, we don't agree with that. And we don't want to be a target. We don't want our neighborhood to be a target. We don't want to be easy pickings. We don't want to attract the criminal element to come to our community to take from our cars or to steal our vehicles." And so, Emily, I wish I had a really good answer. I'm glad you asked the question because we need to raise awareness. We need to talk about this quite a bit. When we interview suspects, we arrest them, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes surveillance details. It takes investigations. It takes getting video, and we'll arrest them. We arrest them regularly. But they might be responsible for 100 crimes before we arrest them. And maybe they have a drug addict. We had one recently, it was a meth addict, and they have an addiction, and they literally go down the street and they just check car door handles. And the ones that are unlocked, they go in, they steal the gun, they steal the purse, they steal a laptop, they steal the GPS, the phone, the whatever it is. And then they go to the pawn store or wherever it is that they're selling their stuff, and they get enough money to support whatever it is that they're doing. And every one of those cases, if the door had been locked and or they didn't have valuables like that in the car, they would not have been a victim.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions on those items? Chief, we've got about a little less than 10 minutes left before we cap up.
The most efficient, most professional, best looking guy on this whole call with his bow tie is Tony Patella. And if it's okay, I'll let him take us home because both these last two items, he probably knows as well as anybody. I just want to give him and his team credit for CALEA. We just recently had an on-site, it was a virtual inspection of our accreditation process. We received reaccreditation. It'll officially happen in a few months, but we have an inspection. It's very thorough of our policies and our facilities, and they actually had to put together a video and do a lot of different things to make it happen. A guy named Craig DeBose, a sergeant who's assigned this task. And I've been a part of the exit interview in other agencies and my former agency in here. And I've never seen such a positive exit interview. Usually there's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of, because you always want to learn. That's the whole purpose of an audit. But I will tell you that our department passed with flying colors. I'll let Tony explain the last two items, but thanks to him and his team, they put a huge amount of work into this. The whole department did. We've been accredited, I think, for 30 years approximately now. And so I can take zero credit for it, that it was nice to be sitting in the seat as the chief during the exit interview. And ironically, one of the assessors, I think he's done 60 agencies, if I'm not mistaken, different assessments over 20 years. And ironically, he was the lead assessor in my former agency about 4 years ago, I think, or around that time frame. And so I knew him. I knew how thorough he was. I knew how much of a stickler he was. And it was amazing the positive things that he had to say. Among them was that he was going to steal ideas from our department, and he actually enjoyed some of the stuff that we were doing with leadership and some other stuff. Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you. Before I begin, I just want to thank everyone for your participation. Very rarely when we come to community groups do we get this many questions, and it really shows that you're interested and you're invested and you care about what you're doing. So I really appreciate that, and I hope more questions come forth. So to kind of wrap up what the chief said about CALIA, just because we got our good approval rating doesn't mean that we stop until the next 3 to 4 years. It's a continuous process that every 3 to 4 months, every quarter, we still have to update our policies and show different proofs of what we're doing. So just because we got, quote, reaccredited now, it doesn't mean that we don't touch everything for the next 3 to 4 years, because that's just untrue. That's a good thing about CALIA. It's always keeping you on your toes. It's keeping you in line with best practices and national trends. So this is just kind of a process that we go through. And Sergeant Dubose, who maintains our CALIA, contacts all the commanders when it's time to turn in our proofs, and everything is done virtually. So once again, it doesn't mean we're stopping, we're just continuing that process. In terms of the complaint process, I don't have a whole lot to give to you because there is good news. Our end of year report should be published sometime early next week, and we should push it out to you guys on Monday the 19th, barring anything crazy happening. It took us a little while to get our data together because of our 3 officer involved shooting incidents, and they are labor intensive, and we had to push some stuff back, but we are pretty much right on schedule. It's a 40-page report that's pretty comprehensive. We focus on use of force, our administrative investigations, which talks about our complaints, and then also some certain training aspects that officers go through to kind of help out with the complaint process and use of force. It's a very detailed report. I'll be willing to provide a more thorough update once we give it to you guys on either a subcommittee meeting or your next CPAC meeting. Just make that request, and I'll be happy to give that presentation to you. Like I said, once we're in the proofreading stages of it now, once we get it out, we'll send it out internally, and then hopefully by Monday the 19th, you will have it an electronic version in your mailbox.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us an opportunity to participate in the CALIA audit process. I did get a chance to participate. I know Paul did and some others on the council did. So thank you for giving us that opportunity. And I'm sure that we were very free and welcomed with making our comments and asking our questions. So I'm glad that it was of some benefit to you in that process. I did, as we move to the next item, topics for next agenda, I did write down just now the complaint process. So we'll put that a little higher on the agenda next time.
Okay.
So that we can get an update, especially since you said we would be able to get it, probably barring anything, April 19th. So that should give us council members enough time to review it and have any questions that we have, we'd be able to ask at that time.
Correct. And in the report, it talks about how you make the complaint, the outcomes of all the complaints, the different levels of complaints. It's very detailed, and I can answer any questions that you have in regards to that.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. Any questions for Captain Quintella, council members? I'm looking. Okay. For topics for the, Councilman Harris, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, in the after action report, on the May 30th, 31st, there was a section that dealt with complaints. And I'd like Captain Cretella for us to have a conversation about just reviewing that, how they were processed, the outcomes and what learnings there were from that at our next subcommittee meeting of the policy committee. I froze.
Okay, make sure you share that with the chairman of the policy committee. That's Councilmember Milligan. You can send that email to him, Councilman Harris. Because you said in the next subcommittee meeting of the policy committee.
Yeah.
Correct?
I mean,
Okay.
when we look at the guidelines, one of the opportunities that we have is to review after the fact some situations, and I think, given the number of questions being raised by the activist community about complaints, it would be helpful for our subcommittee to at least have a conversation with Captain Cretella and review that.
And you're a member of that subcommittee as well.
I
right?
am.
I know you're on communications. Very good. So I know you'll pass that on. Very good. Now, topics for the next agenda I have down, we need to select our October and December meeting dates because we do have our June and August dates. Update regarding the James Island traffic concerns that were expressed tonight from the citizens who called in and from Councilwoman Jackson. And then strategic plan update. Captain Thompson does plan to be with us at the next meeting, so he'll be able to give us an update on that and community engagement. And I do have complaint process. Any other items?
Madam Chair, as you know, I chair the Criminal Justice Reform Subcommittee of the Special Commission on Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Reconciliation. Anticipate that the report from that committee will be available. And I'd just like to brief, by our next meeting, I'd like to be able to provide an overview to the council on the things that are coming out of that committee as well.
Okay, would you be able to share that report prior to the meeting so that members will be able to read it?
It should be done published before the meeting, yes.
Okay. Then should it be published before the meeting, then we'll have that as an agenda item. Okay, very good. Any other items? Council members? Okay, well, with that said, I do want to thank everyone for joining in for the meeting tonight, those who have joined in on YouTube, as well as those who've called in, who are listening in, and definitely for all of our members for joining. And Chief, thank you so very much for always having a full staff representation on the call for us in our meetings to be able to address our concerns as well as share information with us. And so we can continue to focus on the guidelines for which the CPAC was organized. Our next meeting will be on June the 3rd. So please mark that on your calendars. That was decided at our last meeting. And with that stated, is there a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?